In the spring of 1982, a man named José stood outside a bank in Buenos Aires. The doors were locked, the guards were armed, and in his hand was a savings book that had just become worthless. José was 54 years old. He had worked his entire life as a mechanic. He had saved every peso his government told him to trust. He had avoided risk. He had followed the rules. He had done everything right. And in a single night, it was gone. Not stolen by a thief, not lost in a fire, not gambled away, erased by a government that had borrowed more than it could ever repay and decided that the easiest solution was to print money until the currency itself became a lie. José didn't know it then, but he wasn't a victim of bad luck. He was a victim of mathematics. He was collateral damage in a debt crisis that had been building for decades. And today, you are José. You live in a world where every major economy on earth is drowning in debt. The United States, China, Japan, Germany, France, the United Kingdom, India, Brazil, Canada, Australia. Not some of them, all of them. For the first time in recorded history, there is no safe country left. There is no lender of last resort. There is no cavalry coming over the hill. The lifeboats are sinking along with the ship. So what happens when the entire world is in debt, when every government owes more than it can pay, when the system that has held the global economy together for 50 years begins to unravel? Let me show you the pattern, because once you see it, you'll realize that what happened to José in 1982 isn't history. It's a preview, it's a blueprint, and it's coming for you. Governments don't think about debt the way you do. When you borrow money, you plan to. Pay it back, you budget, you sacrifice, you work extra hours, you cut spending, you treat debt like a burden. When governments borrow money, they plan to borrow more. This is called rolling the debt. You take out a new loan to pay off the old one, then another loan to pay that one, then another. It's a treadmill that never stops. It's a Ponzi scheme with a flag. On top, for decades, this system worked because interest rates kept falling. In the 1980s, the United States paid 15% interest on its debt. By 2020, it was paying less than 1%. It was like having a massive credit card balance with a shrinking minimum payment. Governments could borrow trillions and barely feel the weight. Politicians loved it. They could promise everything, healthcare, pensions, infrastructure, wars, without raising taxes. They could kick the bill down the road and let the next generation deal with it. But here's the part they didn't tell you. That era is over. Interest rates are rising. And when rates rise, the cost of rolling the debt explodes. The United States now pays over $1 trillion per year just in interest. That's more than the entire defense budget, more than education, more than infrastructure. Japan spends 30% of its tax revenue on interest alone. Italy can't survive without the European Central Bank printing money to buy its bonds. This is the interest trap. And here's the brutal truth. Once a nation spends more on interest than on its future, more on the past than on the present, collapse becomes a countdown, not a possibility. José's government hit that wall in 1982. They couldn't pay the interest. So they printed money. And when they printed, José's savings evaporated like water on hot asphalt. Sound familiar? Because right now more than half of the G20 is approaching that same wall. And this time, there's nowhere to run. In every previous debt crisis, there was an escape route. When Argentina collapsed in 1982, investors fled to the dollar. When the ruble collapsed in 1998, they fled to the euro. When the peso collapsed, they fled to the yen. When Greece imploded, they fled to German bonds. There was always a safe haven, a place where capital could hide while the storm passed. But look closely at the map today. The safe havens are gone. They have been replaced by the most indebted players in the game. The United States has $34 trillion in official debt and over $100 trillion in unfunded liabilities. Japan has a debt to GDP ratio of 260%, at the highest in the developed world. China is hiding a shadow banking crisis larger than the 2008 subprime bubble with local governments drowning in unpayable loans. Europe is one energy shock away from fiscal collapse. This is the contagion of debt. When one domino falls, it pulls the others down with it. Why? Because every central bank holds the debt of every other central bank as reserves. They own each other's I owe us. It's a circular firing squad. It's like a group of mountain climbers tied to the same rope. If the lead climber slips, the entire line is pulled off the cliff, and you're at the end of that rope. Before every collapse, there is a smart money exit. In 1929, it was the Rockefellers selling stocks before the crash. In 2008, it was Goldman Sachs shorting subprime mortgages while selling them to pension funds. Today, it's central banks in the East, China, Russia, India, dumping U.S. treasuries and buying gold at the fastest rate in history. They see what's coming. They know that when every country is in debt, the only way out is a reset, a moment. When the old promises are broken, the old contracts are torn up, and a new system is born from the ashes of the old one, and they are positioning themselves to survive it. But you are being told to stay calm, to keep your money in safe government bonds and savings accounts, to trust the system. You are being positioned as the exit liquidity for the greatest debt bubble in human history. Jose was told the same thing in 1982. He believed it, and he lost everything. To understand why every country is in debt, you need to know about a deal that was made 50 years ago, a deal that was never voted on, a deal that most people have never heard of, the petrodollar agreement of 1974. After the United States abandoned the gold standard in 1971, the dollar was in free fall. The world no longer trusted it. Inflation was exploding. The American empire was on the verge of collapse. So the U.S. made a deal with Saudi Arabia. Here's how it worked. Saudi Arabia would sell oil only in U.S. dollars. In exchange, the U.S. would provide military protection and buy Saudi debt. This meant that every country on Earth, if they wanted oil, and every country needs oil, had to hold dollars. It didn't matter if they trusted the U.S. or not. They had no choice. This is why the dollar became the world's reserve currency, not because of trust, not because of economic strength, because of force, because of a system that gave the world no alternative. And here's the part that should keep you up at night. To buy dollars, countries had to sell their own goods to America. This created massive trade imbalances. Countries like China and Japan accumulated trillions in dollar reserves, but they couldn't spend those dollars on their own people, so they lent them back to the U.S. by buying treasury bonds. This is the debt trap. The U.S. could borrow unlimited amounts because the world was forced to lend. And the world was forced to lend because they were forced to hold dollars. It was the most elegant financial prison ever designed, a system where the debtor controlled the creditor. But here's the twist. In June 2024, Saudi Arabia quietly let the petrodollar agreement expire. They announced they would accept yuan, euros, rupees, and other currencies for oil. The prison door just opened. And when the world no longer needs dollars to buy oil, they no longer need to hold trillions in U.S. debt. This is the beginning of the end. There's an ancient symbol called the Ouroboros, a snake eating its own tail. It represents a system that consumes itself to stay alive. That's the global debt system today. Central banks print money to buy government bonds. Governments use that money to pay interest on old bonds. Then they issue new bonds to pay the interest on those bonds. The snake is eating itself. And here's the problem. The snake is running out of tail. This process triggers the Cantillon effect, a silent theft. When the central bank prints new money, that money reaches the banks and the financial elite first. They use that fresh capital to buy up assets, real estate, stocks, gold, before prices rise. By the time that money trickles down to your paycheck, the prices of everything have already skyrocketed. You are not participating in an economy, you're being harvested. The snake is eating its tail, and you are the tail. When Jose stood outside that bank in Buenos Aires, he didn't see the collapse coming. He saw the propaganda, he saw the parades. He believed his government when they said everything was under control. And then one morning, he woke up to locked bank doors and armed guards. Today, you are Jose. You see stock markets at all-time highs. You see politicians promising stability. You believe that your country is different, that it won't happen here. But the math doesn't care about your belief. When the petrodollar system unravels, the demand for U.S. debt will collapse. When demand collapses, interest rates will spike. When rates spike, the government will have two choices, default or print. If they default, the banks collapse. Your deposits vanish. Your pension evaporates. If they print, your savings collapse. The currency becomes worthless. A loaf of bread costs what a car used to cost. Either way, you pay the price. This is the silent default. It's the most efficient way to rob a population without them ever realizing who the thief was. Your pension is invested in government bonds. Your 401k is a bet on a system built on 50 years of forced dollar demand. Your savings account is denominated in a currency that is being printed to. Pay a debt that can never be repaid. You are not an investor. You are a donor. You are the collateral. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. Every empire that reached this level of debt ended the same way. Rome debased the denarius until soldiers refused to accept it as payment. Britain printed the pound into irrelevance after 2 world wars. The Weimar Republic printed until a wheelbarrow of cash couldn't buy a loaf of bread. Argentina, Venezuela, Turkey, Zimbabwe, they all believed they were different. They all believed their government would protect them. They were all wrong. What happens when every country is in debt? The system resets, not through a vote, not through a revolution, through mathematics. The interest becomes unpayable. The currency becomes worthless. The promises become lies. And when the reset begins, you will not be asked. You will not be warned. You will simply wake up, like José, on the wrong side of a locked door, holding paper that no longer means anything. The party is over. The bill has arrived. And since every country is in debt, there is only one person left to pay it. You. The man in Buenos Aires in 1982 didn't think it could happen to him. He thought his country was stable. He thought his savings were safe. He was wrong. Don't make the same mistake.